Let's say this Hangout is on there live. This Hangout on there is live. And I guess I should share my screen again. And do that. And present. I'm supposed to do. So I'm sharing my screen. There's still a present to everyone on here. Okay. And I'm trying to practice what I've read about creating workflows using domain-driven design made functional book by Scott Vlashin. So I'm importing this web app to a Xamarin app, and my last video I got stuck because one thing I need to be careful how what terms I use, because I'm using terms such as trigger and emit interchangeably. So in the last video, I kept on saying trigger, and that's not correct. I know what I meant, but I was using the wrong term, which can confuse others. And I assume that when doing domain-driven design, it's all about terminology, and there has to be agreement on terms and their meaning. So I get that, right? So moving forward, I will concentrate on being very careful not to say trigger an event when in actuality, what I'm describing is emitting an event, or the emission of events, right? And just out of curiosity, let me see, I could kill you. Out of curiosity, the word emit, the definition, to produce and discharge, okay? So I'm going to start using the term emits. In addition to that, I had got stuck yesterday, or in my last video, because from the book, my understanding or my interpretation is that domain events can only be emitted through workflows, meaning that domain events can only have their visibility acknowledged for others to observe or to work with. Maybe that's better. Only through a contained workflow. And so I came across the scenario of, just a very simple user that wants to log in and a user that wants to log out. And it's really as simple as, for login, typing in your credentials and hitting the login button. And that's it, right? And what had confused me is that in the book, it was advocating that I/O is not done inside of a workflow, meaning there's no web requests, there's no type of messaging to the outside world, whether it's a post or a get that's done within a workflow. Translated, a workflow is supposed to be pure domain logic. And so I'm like, okay, well, hell's bells. What the freak am I supposed to do in a workflow then? Especially with the simple operations of logging in a user and logging out. I mean, what other logic is there to perform a login besides basically sending your credentials over the wire and receiving a response saying you've been accepted. Like that's the part that I struggled with because this is all new to me, and I invited people to start a study group or a reading group regarding this philosophy of building software, and no one really responded. So this is me doing my own reading group, my own study group. I do it by myself. Um, anyway, yeah, that's what I got stuck on. So since then, I wrote some code, and what used to be, let me try to figure out what used to be log in, log out is handle login and handle log out. And the reason why I changed the name is because Scott Blashin advocated that I/O should be done or is encouraged to be done at the edges of a workflow. So my understanding is before you enter a workflow, then I/O can be done, and the result of that I/O can be passed into that workflow as an argument. And when an I/O completes, the output of that I/O, or let me start over. When a workflow completes, the output of that workflow is going to be emitted domain events. And those domain events can be used to do whatever with it, do some other I/O before entering the next workflow. So that's my understanding of it. So what used to be log in, log out commands are now log in or now handle login and handle log out. And my intention is that the actual I/O is done before this handle login work gets executed, and before this handle log out gets executed. Meaning that when I say I/O gets done, a web request gets sent with credentials to the server for logging in a user. And that server is going to respond with a result of OK or error. If it's OK, it's going to pass back the provider. If it's error, it's going to pass back those credentials. We call this login request. And maybe that we should change the name of login requests so it sounds better to, if I say login request, hold up, type credentials equals login request. So if we do a type alias, which I think is the name, do something like that, then theoretically we should be able to go back over here and we should say, instead of login request, we say credentials. Okay, something like that. Hold up. Yeah. Okay. So this result, if it's okay, then it passes back a provider. If it's an error, then it passes back the credentials. Logout, if it's successful, it passes back a unit, which is similar to a void, which is similar to do nothing. And if it errors, it passes back the credentials. Okay. Now what? If we go back to our workflows, this seems very procedural. What I'm essentially doing is, my understanding is perhaps for every command, my understanding is that there needs to be an associated workflow for every command. And within that workflow, that command will always be an input that workflow will have a parameter for. And it will take in or consume that command as an input into its function. It'll emit domain events from it based on whatever pure domain logic that it executes. So in this case, this handle login, which is done after IO is executed, we enter into this handle session workflow. And this handle session takes a command, which could be handle login or handle logout, in which IO is already done, and we have a response that's attached to that command, and we basically parse that response or pattern match on that response. Say, well, was the response successful or was it an error? If it was successful, we take the provider and we emit the domain event that the provider logged in. If it was error, we say login failed and here's the credentials. Okay. We do something similar with logout. The response, if it's okay, I'm not even sure if a provider is even, in a way, it probably doesn't even make sense for the response of logout to return a provider. Maybe it does. I'm not sure. This might be okay. Anyway, if it's successful, then we just say logged out. And if there's any type of issues or error, we say, here's logout failed. Which these commands didn't exist in my last video. These commands were actually flushed out as a result of me going through or doing the pattern match for these domain events. And I discovered that, well, I don't have a domain event for the failure of a login, the failure of a logout. And whenever you're doing IO, this is coming from me. I believe that whenever you're doing IO, you will always have the possibility of error, right? Because it's no longer within the domain logic's control. You're interacting with the outside world, and the outside world can be fairly unpredictable, right? So that's in there now. Logout failed as an event. And that doesn't require any payload. That should be straight. Oh, why are you not being recognized? Logged out. Why is this not being recognized? If I try to build, is it going to be recognized then? This should be recognized. Okay, so it builds. I had to manually build it, and then the red squiggly went away. It's still not getting this color coded. This is a preview of Visual Studio 2017. I think it's 15.6. So, I mean, it's not going to be perfect, right? But it's doing its job right now. Okay, so I believe we successfully implemented the handle session workflow. Up here was the handle registration, which I covered in my last video. And all this is me practicing, right? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm practicing. So in this case, I'm practicing workflows and trying to get an understanding on my own personal time, on my own off time. It's like 5:30 in the morning, and this is what I'm on. Because when it's go time and there's a client or an employer that wants my services and they want me to take the lead, the thought process is I make all my mistakes on my own time. I make all my mistakes training in the ring, right? And then when it's go time, well, it's time for me to perform. And hopefully, the majority of my mistakes or challenges, well, I've already been through it already. I already know how to get over it, right? And that's the whole point of this. And this is what separates me from damn near everybody else is the fact that I practice, I practice, I practice so that I can treat the budget of an employer with the utmost respect. Who else is doing that? For real. Anyway, next is handle update. Okay. Now, what does that mean? Well, edit and save, right? And this is all under, if I collapse all these projects, this is all within the bounded context of a profile, right? So a profile handles session of log in and log out, handle registration in which there's a validate command, right? And that's going to basically call a function that will emit a form being validated or a form not validated, right? Along with the payloads. So now I'm on handle update, in which within the application, there's a requirement for editing a profile. And so what I mean by that is if I go to Nikeza, and I sign in, bismonger.net, and I sign in, then I could click on this profile on the right, and I can, I don't know, let's say that, let's say I got married to a man or something, and I decided to change my name. Well, I don't have to change my last name and marry a guy. I can just change my last name. It doesn't require me actually like performing an alternative lifestyle. So like if I change my name to Scott Scott Go Lucky, I don't know, whatever, or Scott McLovin, and you could tell me what movie I got that from with the last name McLovin. If you tell me that, you get points. Um, this is editing a profile, right? So this is this is me editing the profile. This would be saving the profile. The command for edit the profile, I think, would be associated to me clicking this profile link over here in the top right hand side. And then the command for saving the profile would come after the IO is performed for save. That's my understanding. Okay. And if we go back, so if we go back over here, what will this edit really have? Okay. When we edit, when the edit command comes in, we saw that on the web application, a navigation takes place for the profile editor. Now, is there really a workflow that that we can use? And I'm thinking no, but there is a workflow for validate edit, right? Validate edit. And there is also, when you save, we can say handle saved. It's really like, well, handle save, and it's going to be really a result of a profile. Else it's going to be the save. If it's successful, we have a new profile. If it's an error, then it should return back the profile request. It should return. I think I have something called profile request in here. Something like that. But this name is off. That doesn't really describe what I want. What we really probably want, because the thought process is to lean on our types, lean heavily on the type system, is if the save is successful, then we have a profile that reflects that recently saved edit of a profile. If it's not successful, then we really have a profile draft, or a we have a profile draft. I'm really not aware of a better term for that. It's basically it's an unsaved profile. So, or we have profile candidate. No, I'm not sure if I should say unsaved profile. That sounds more English, or say profile candidate. Or say I don't know. I'm starting to think draft is better. When something is draft, it gets reviewed, and then sooner or later, it has the potential to be accepted. Okay. So this represents a profile that was actually saved. If saving the profile was successful, if saving the profile was not successful, then we return back the draft of the profile that we wanted to save. Okay. So it's really the same record, but it's a different type, right? Which means that it has a different meaning, which means that we operate on it differently. So you could say like CLI mutable, and you could say type profile draft equals, and you could say profile request, something like that. But this is just a type alias. It's a type alias. What I mean by that is I think you can still use profile request and profile draft interchangeably, which may be okay. but the compiler won't enforce. The reason why I say this is yeah, that might be okay for right now. Like, does it really matter? The intent is. I think this is okay for now. I guess I'll find out later. So you handle the save, in which the result, if it's successful, we get a profile. If it's not successful, then we get the profile that was submitted. And maybe profile draft should really be profile submitted. Like that. Profile submitted is not recognized because it's not smart enough to go into all the references to make that update. Okay. So when we say validate edit, we need to handle that. Might be a profile draft. And does that really need to be mutable though? Profile draft, something like that. So in the book is, I think it's pretty explicit, where it it talks about a state machine and how you have, if memory serves me correctly, you have workflows that will operate based on certain states. And the conflict that I think I'm observing right now is when you do a type alias, that's not enforcing the recognition of a state. We're just aliasing a type with another type. Okay. So what we could do is we either duplicate this, the actual provider request, and we have all the same fields to represent a different state of the profile, such as the profile submitted that got returned back to us because it wasn't, the server didn't like it, and so it didn't want to accept it. We have a profile draft, which is basically the state before it gets submitted. These are all different states, but my understanding is you can use all these interchangeably right now, which is what I don't think we want based on what the book is providing us guidance on. So with that said, we can probably make profile submitted, profile draft wrappers ultimately of this profile request. And yeah, so this profile request, this is a type that was defined originally within the server. The server would receive a request to create a profile, and that's why it's named like this. So that's why we have this name that kind of doesn't really make sense in the context that we're using right now. So let me think about this. What we could do is we can create and create this notion of a profile. We alias a profile request, and that's fine. And then we, for our profile draft, in our profile submitted, our profile draft equals a profile. But what I wanted to say is, since I'm still doing type aliasing, we probably want to wrap it and say profile draft equals a profile draft of a profile. Am I doing this right? Type profile draft equals. Oh yeah, this is the same issue I ran into a couple days ago where I didn't put of. Okay, and so, and then we do the same thing here. A profile submitted equals. No. We don't want to do it like that. We want to do it like this. We want to do a record like this. So a profile draft is a record that has a profile like that. Okay. And the profile submitted is the same thing. Something like that. And so we have a profile draft right here that doesn't necessarily get sent over the wire. It just represents a certain state. And then we have profile submitted over here. And so go back over here. In our edit command, if we go to commands, there's a validate edit. Have a validate edit profile, and we have a handle save. Handle save. Our handle save is a response. Okay. And we basically pattern match on that response. We could copy this over here to follow that pattern. And we could say we handle save, and if it's okay, this is profile, it's not a provider. And the error is the profile that was submitted, something like that. And the event is profiles. If it's okay, the profile was saved. And if it's an error, then the profile was not saved, right? So you say profile profile saved failed, something like that, which doesn't exist, which is what we need to create as we realize a new domain event. And then that will be of what is going to be of. It's going to be of that profile submitted. Profile should be a profile submitted. That. Okay. So we have our profile saved, we have our profile save failed. And that is it for the handle save. For the validate edit, what else is wrong? Oh, yeah. Profile. But this profile is profile submitted. Well, yeah, that should be straight. This profile was a data transfer profile. This profile down here was, if I go to profile saved, profile submitted, that should line up. What am I missing? So this expression was to have type validated profile events. Here it has, what are you talking about? This response is if it's successful, it returns a profile. If it's not successful, it returns a error. This expression was expected to have type validated as an input and profile events as output, but here it has profile events. I don't know what you're talking about. Let's revisit this. Our profile saved has the validated up here, yes. Our profile save failed has the profile submitted. So do I need to do something like this? Say, profile equals something like that. And say profile submitted. Can I do that? I'm not sure how you, it certainly doesn't like that. What I'm suggesting is I'm trying to say let profile submitted equal, and if I go to my data transfer, our profile submitted, it's like this right here. And so I'm trying to say let profile submitted equals profile submitted. And I'm not sure how you reference another type. I'm trying to do something like this. Oh, I didn't have to do that. I'm trying to do something like this. And something like this. I don't know how to, the value or constructor of profile submitted is not defined. Maybe you want one of the following. And I'm saying, yeah, how am I supposed to do this? Replace with profile requested. No, I want profile submitted. Profile submitted is right here. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to profile submitted, profile equal. If I leave this off, profile submitted is the very last type to be defined. Profile. Yeah, so it doesn't know what that is. And I did import this up here. No, I didn't. Okay, so I say open Nikeza dot data transfer. Now if I do that, I'll go back down here. It says a value or constructor or profile submitted is not. Are you sure? If I try to build, I'm curious if I could write syntax like this. I know there's a way that I could specify. So now if I try to do this, prefix profile submitted with underscore, rename profile submitted. Da, 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 da. Yeah, I'm not sure how to do this. And this profile, yeah, this is, how do I do this? These are both wrappers, right? But they mean something different. And I'm trying to take this profile submitted. I'm trying to reference this profile submitted. And I thought that I could say profile submitted and say, basically say profile equals, but this profile here already says profile submit. Oh, okay. I think I understand now. It's already in there. So I could do something like this, and I can get rid of this up here, I think, because this is already profile submitted in here and profile saved. Basically operates on profile, or profile save failed operates on profile submitted. And that needs to be, if I go to my commands, handle save, you have profile submitted. Yeah, that stuff should line up. I'm not sure what else. I know it's something simple. Let me look at this again. This expression was expected to have type validated as input in profile events as output, but just has profile events. What are you talking about? Why is this okay to have? Profile saved is validated here, right? But this profile saved failed is completely different. And that's what I'm doing over here. So what are you talking about validated? There is profile saved failed. Validated profile advanced, but here's profile. I know this is something. This is unused, so we can get rid of that. This is unused as well. Get rid of that. Okay. And here. I'm going to have to probably take a break, and maybe I can understand the compile there because I'm not seeing it at all. I'm not seeing it at all. This is not being used. Am I not? What the freak am I doing wrong? It says that this is no longer being used, but I'm using it right here. This profile failed is of profile submitted. Like, I don't, this profile submitted. I'm really not understanding. Like this is clear to me. Profile submitted takes a profile request. That takes a profile request. That's a profile request is what it operates on. And if we go back to in the, hold up, profile. Okay, if we go back over here, it's profile submitted. Yeah, so I'm not going to waste too much time on this recording, but this is what I'm on right now, and this is pretty much done for this profile bounded context. I got to figure out what stupid error I'm missing, and then I'll move on with another workflow, which is more than likely going to be maybe portfolio or subscriptions. Not sure which one, but I'm going to end this video and I'll figure out whatever stupid thing I did later. So I'm out. Peace. Stop broadcast.